All right, I want to welcome on my next guest. We got a very special guest. We've got three-time Super Bowl champion, Dallas Cowboys legend, as well as former Air Force fighter pilot, Mr. Chad Hennings. Chad, how's everything going for you?
Life is good, my friend. Life is good.
All right, so my first question is, what the hell's going on with your Cowboys?
If I knew that, I'd be a very wealthy man. No, it's this whole year, this COVID stuff has been ridiculous. And I think just sports in general, it's when players can't, in the off season work out together, when they've been isolated, they can't interact with the new coach, with their coach, with the new coaching staff, and then we start to lose, man, the wheels just fall off the bus and it's tough to stay motivated and try to win games.
Has DeMarcus Lawrence called you and said, like, hey, what do I do?
No, but and I tell you, it's tough to watch.
Well, the division as a whole, like, they're in it, which is crazy. So it's wild. So I want to ask you a little about your early life. I saw some former interview today. Is it true you grew up on a farm with 1,200 cows?
Yeah. No, I grew up on a farm. I'm a farm boy from Iowa.
Wow.
And farm, the crops that we raised were to support a feedlot operation. So we'd have about 1,000 head of cattle on our property at any given time. So I grew up eating red meat twice a day, every day of my life.
Do you use them for pass wrestling drills at all or no?
Cow tipping was a big, great sport. That it helped me actually my wrestling, that and wrestling hogs, right?
Like a swim move, kind of getting around them.
That's right.
Yeah. So how did you decide upon going to Air Force?
For me, I wanted to have an experience that I wouldn't have going to a traditional school. I had several goals. I wanted to get a phenomenal education. I wanted to have an experience that's, again, not at your traditional school. And I wanted to play Division I college football. Those were my goals. And playing at the Air Force Academy was, it certainly filled all those aspirations for me. And I'm glad it worked out the way it did, because it gave me an opportunity to experience so many different things in life, get a phenomenal education, improve my leadership abilities, and play Division I ball.
Was college and just having an interesting education, was that your goal at the time, or was the NFL at all on your radar?
NFL was never on my radar. Again, I grew up in a small rural community in Iowa that, all conference, but again, not highly recruited coming out of high school. And, when you choosing a service academy is not typically, when you go that route, you're not thinking about the NFL. And
David Robinson did it for the Spurs, so I think it's just you and him. So
but I can tell you that he went in not with the intention of going to the NBA, because he grew 6 inches while he was there at the Naval Academy. So
was there a height requirement? Because I once heard that there was a height requirement, and he kind of got by because he grew once he got there.
Well, he did, and he kind of probably cut a deal that, hey, you stay here and let you play on the Olympic team, on the service team, and you can choose your assignments and eventually go play sooner than later.
Did you know you wanted to be a pilot?
No. I mean, it wasn't something that was a burning aspiration of mine growing up, but it's one of those things that, having the experiences that I did at the academy, from flying in glider aircraft to flying in Cessna 172s, to get that experience, I caught the bug. And with all the different classes that I took there, from the aeronautical engineering classes, learning about flight, going to different active duty Air Force bases, seeing an F-16, F-15, A-10s take off and fly and do missions. Man, if you don't have the bug, you would get the bug once you experience that.
How many hours of training do you think you had before you actually got in an actual jet?
Which was crazy. We had, it was about 2 weeks of academics to learn the systems of the aircraft. And then, your first ride, you fly with an instructor pilot, but here you go. Crazy thing though, after I finished pilot training, when I received the assignment to fly the A10, you've had about a year of pilot training at that point in time of jet time. You have a few hundred hours in the jet, but your first flight in the A10 is solo. You learn the systems, and the mechanics of flight are all the same, but first flight was solo, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah. No, because I didn't do so well with the parallel parking or the driver's test. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to cross that off my list. That's wild. And then so once you got in it, did you just kind of get that rush that you're like, all right, this feels right. I'm going to keep doing
this. For me, flying the A10 was like a D lineman's dream, because the missions that we would fly I was assigned to an active duty base in England, and we'd forward deploy to Germany and Central Europe. And the missions that I would fly, I'd fly at, anywhere from a couple hundred feet to 500 feet above the ground in support of closer support of our armed forces, the infantry, and taking out, the enemy tanks.
Yeah.
And the missions that we would fly, a lot of it was being flexible, and it would change so much. The dynamics of the mission would change while you're in the air, and you communication, sometimes just hand signals with your wingman as to how to go about and execute a mission. It was awesome. And there was so much preparation.
Yeah.
And the experience that I had with doing that it has helped me ultimately when I got to the Cowboys, as well as in business, is to just how to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And I'm so very fortunate that I had that experience in life.
What kind of leg room do they have in those jets? Because I know you're a tall guy.
Leg room, no, I had received waivers for my height and my weight to be able to fly. I was too tall and too heavy. So I was crammed in there. But Zach, when you're a 23, 24, 25-year-old kid, you don't think about the what ifs. It's all about the rush and the experience. And I was definitely in that camp.
Yeah. So I have a question. Were some of like the conditions you were flying in is like now like driving in the worst fog, worst, like everything is nothing compared to being up in the air? Like in terms of like bad weather conditions, now you're like,
bad weather conditions. Yeah. When flying missions out of England, where it's complete overcast clouds from end of, first part of October through April, that you're flying in the weather all the time. I mean, England is probably one of the most depressing places to be during that time of year because you never see the sun.
Well, they're still in 1883. So that's the thing.
But no, we had to learn, and particularly when you fly in fingertip formation, where you have just 3 feet of wingtip clearance between jets, where you're flying as one jet.
Wow.
You're going through that weather, and many times all you can see is a flashing light on his wingtip, top and bottom of his fuselage, as well as in front of his nose cone. That's all you can see. I mean, you may be flying upside down as far as you know. You have no horizontal or horizon references. You don't know. So there's a lot of trust with your flight lead of whether he's doing the job correctly.
I saw one story you were telling about how one time I don't think you had enough fuel and you had to land somewhere and nobody spoke English.
Well, it was on my initial. We were ferrying jets out of England to Turkey when we were first deployed in the Gulf War. Over the Mediterranean, I ended up losing one of my engines. The A10 is a 2-engine aircraft. My number 2, my right engine, ended up losing an oil seal, so I was spewing oil out. And in that case, when you have that type of emergency procedure, you shut the engine down. So I had to land single engine at a naval base in Suda Bay, Crete, on the island of Crete, and talking to Greek air controllers. It was kind of stressful and task saturating of just to communicate with somebody that speaks English as a second language, trying to tell them what situation that you're dealing with, and hey, you need to get down and land soon. Because the A10 is an underpowered aircraft. It flies okay on 2 engines. But on 1 engine, you need to manage your flight speed and your altitude and your airspeed very efficiently.
You said that was your first flight?
No, my first. Well.
Oh, okay. I was going to say because like that's wild. That would be wild.
That would have been. That's crazy. But no, we were right over the Mediterranean Sea, where all you can see is a couple islands off in the distance, and not much else aside from water everywhere.
I figured like you get to your land there and you're like, no one speaks English, and you're like, all right, I live here now. Like this is, that's wild. And then, so you continue to have a storied career in the Air Force while so you were playing football. How did you have enough time to focus on everything you needed to? Cause I'm sure your course load was much more than the average students.
Yeah. I mean, when I was at the Air Force Academy, it's the college experience that I would average probably 20 credit hours a semester.
Okay.
Plus the military training we did, plus, practice and playing games. So you learn to manage your time very well. And if you didn't, it was a sink or swim mentality. If you didn't learn that skill set, you weren't going to last long.
I saw, is it true you were drafted by Tom Landry, but it was before your service time?
Yeah, Tom Landry, Gil Brandt, Tex Schramm, that era drafted me in the 11th round in 1988. So it's a long time ago when they had 11 rounds in the draft.
Yeah.
But my time when I was able to ultimately get to the Cowboys, Jerry Jones had bought the team. Jimmy Johnson was the coach. And they didn't know who the heck I was when I was finally eligible to come and play.
So how does the contract roll over that? Was it just kind of like, all right, your rookie contract starts now, or how did that work?
I'm sure they're still the same, but there was a provision in all NFL contracts that in time of national crisis or emergency where people go to war, this dates back to the Korean conflict, World War II, the Vietnam era, that if, a guy was drafted and went off to war, that his contractual rights were retained by the team that drafted him or held his contract. So I kind of came in under that provision.
So when you get to the Cowboys, when was the last time you played organized football?
4 years prior, a little over 4 years prior to that.
So did you expect the workout to go as well as it did, or what were you hearing? What did you think they were?
Well, two different things. Well, we're talking how the actual went was our armed forces were going through a reduction in force, meaning that they were waiving commitment time from the guys because we needed to downsize after the first Gulf War. This was in early '92. They waived my pilot training commitment. See, the standard commitment graduating from a service academy is 5 years.
Okay.
My commitment was 8 years because I went through pilot training. They spend a little more money on you, try to train you, so they want you for a longer period of time. So I had an 8-year commitment, and at this point in time, I had been in the Air Force for 4 years. But the Air Force went and they waived the pilot training commitment, so I ended up still owing them 1 year, in for 4, now a minimum of a 5-year commitment. Okay. But not enough individuals were getting out, so they then waived 24 months or 2 years off the service academy commitment, which then allowed me to go pursue, something else. And not just for me, but a lot of my peers went to go fly for the airlines at that point in time.
Oh, cool.
So when the guy when they drafted me, the agent who represented me, I contacted him and said, "Hey, I'm eligible to get out. Are the Cowboys still interested in me?" Because they transitioned in ownership. He calls me back the next day. Long story short, there was a ticket waiting for me at London Heathrow Airport. I flew to Dallas, did a workout for the Cowboys, obviously impressed them enough that they took a flyer on me, wanted me out. Jimmy Johnson asked, "Hey, we like what we see. When can you join us?" I have no idea. I salute smartly and said, "I'll let you know, sir." Flew back to England, submitted my paperwork. Within 3 weeks, I was out processed out of the Air Force, flying back to the States to start my first training camp.
Did they add you to the 53 or however many players at a time, or the practice squad?
No, I was actually, then I went through the training camp with them and I made the 53-man squad at that point in time. And so, my thing, Zach, I flew my last mission in Northern Iraq in the early part of '92, and I played in the Super Bowl the same year. That's how fast life happened for me.
Unbelievable. Have you ever flown Jerry Jones' plane? You ever said, "Hey, I can help you out?"
I've flown in it. I've never flown it. Well, I take that back. I have. I got stuck in this plane. I knew the pilots, and they let me come up and fly a little bit when I was on it.
Does Jerry know you were doing that or not?
I'm sure we were doing barrel rolls and loops and aileron rolls and everything else.
Unbelievable. So you get to the Cowboys. What's your experience? What's your what's it like? Because you're obviously older than all the other rookies on the team. You've been through the military. What was it? An easy adjustment period? What was that like?
Well, there's always an adjustment period. There's certain stress levels, that on those, the hierarchy of life stress, the top two, like if there's a death in the family, change of occupation, a move, I had two of like the top 3 stress factors working for me. So having not played the game in, 4 years, adjusting to a climate where Europe, it's in the summertime, a high of 78, moving to Texas where it's 95 degrees and 70% humidity, putting on the pads, it was a big adjustment for me to be able to do that. But, perseverance and commitment ruled the day.
Yeah. What was your first memory of meeting Michael Irvin?
First memory of meeting Michael that I can mention?
Yeah.
See, Michael and I were in their first draft class, and I would tease, to your earlier question too, I would tease my teammates that, "Hey guys, do whatever you want, say whatever you want to me. I've had a real job before I came here. I was a fighter pilot. I flew missions, quote unquote combat missions, and I've flown jets. So there's not much from a mental stress standpoint you're going to throw at me that's going to move the needle. But, it's a different form of stress, physical stress, mental stress. But Michael's a character. I mean, I think with the guys like Mark Tuaney, Frank Cornish, Nate Newton, Charles Haley, if you guys remember all those names.
Oh, yeah.
These guys, there was more levity in the locker room. I've never laughed so hard in my life.
That's
Just
awesome.
some of the pranks that they would pull on each other. You can imagine when you're 25 years old, you're a millionaire, you have access to all this cash, but you're still a 15-year-old kid at heart.
Yeah.
So it is hilarious what some of the pranks that they pull on one another.
I have a question. I ask this everybody who plays the NFC East. What's the most annoying opposing NFC East fan base?
Oh yeah, you already know it before I'm even going to answer that question. Philadelphia Eagles.
Have they ever? What's the wildest thing somebody said to you? I've heard one crazy thing. Dexter Manley told me somebody threw eggs at him, which was hard-boiled eggs. Which I'm like, I don't know how you're getting that into RFK. But did you ever have any interesting experience with the Eagles fans?
Yeah, totally. I mean, my first game there, it was they had just had an ice storm, and they said basically they security briefed us, when you're walking in and out of the locker room, make sure you're wearing your helmet because you're going to probably get pelted with ice balls. And a lot of times, they put batteries in it and they stuff all this stuff. And you can imagine with Jimmy Johnson back in the day when he had that coif, his hair was perfect. He had to put a helmet on to come in and out of the locker room because they were going to pelt him too. Brutal fans.
Unreal. So that first year, correct me if I'm wrong, that was you. So you went right to the Super Bowl. What was that like? Just like, all right, this is obviously not going to happen every year, but like this is like a culture shock.
At that point in time, when you're in the mix, you're drinking by the fire hose and you're just having all these experiences. And 3 of my first 4 years, we went to the Super Bowl. So I thought, man, this is how it's supposed to be. But hindsight looking back, I look at those teams and I've never been around a group of more selfless individuals where everybody's attitude was for the team, that their individual accomplishments or wants and desires were subservient to that of the team. If we didn't make it to the Super Bowl and win the Super Bowl, it wasn't a successful year. And just being around that environment with those individuals that are now Hall of Famers, and hopefully we can get a few more in.
Yeah.
It was a very unique experience and very surreal experience that I look back and I appreciate more now than what I did then, because when you're in the mix of it, this is life, and you're trying to repeat year after year after year after year, and it's a challenge.
I saw. Is it true that first Super Bowl you either did not play much or you didn't get into the game?
Well, I was inactive for the first 7 games. 7 or 8 games of my career, meaning inactive. I was in civilian clothes standing on the sidelines. And I went up to Coach Johnson after that period of time and I said, Coach, I'll do whatever it takes to get on the field. I'll play special teams. As a defensive lineman who's 6'6", it's probably 275, 280 at the time. He said, okay. So I was running down kickoffs, covering punts, on the field goal protection team, the PAT team. I was doing whatever it takes. And that's how I eventually got on the field. And then when you're there, being who we are at that point in time, we were so deep in the D line that when we'd get up, I'd start to get playing time. So then I got to the point where I can impress the coaches with my defensive lineman play, which eventually was able to work into a starting position then. But that's why I tell a lot of kids, do whatever it takes to get on the field, volunteer, play whatever. Show that you're a good teammate and you want to contribute to the success of the team. Put your ego on the sidelines and just work hard and get after it.
Do you think having that early success, knowing that since you didn't get that much time, made you want to be like, all right, once I get there, I want to be right back here?
In what way?
In terms of like, all right, I see what these guys are doing in the Super Bowl. They're playing. I want to be out on this field for a Super Bowl. Like I want to be right back here in this lineup.
Yeah, year after year after year, that's definitely a motivator. And to have that experience. So I went from playing kickoffs, running down kickoffs in that first Buffalo game. And you can imagine, not that I'm complaining by any stretch of the means, but we scored a lot of points. So you're having to basically do a 70, 80-yard sprint. And I had to do like 14 of those suckers, plus running down punts and kickoffs too. Running down punts I'm not a track athlete. For a big guy, that was taxing. But fortunately, my third Super Bowl, I'm in there, playing, and I ended up getting a couple sacks in the game.
Awesome.
So my experience at the Super Bowls ran the gamut.
Do you feel bad at all for Bills fans for losing 4 straight?
Say that again.
Do you have any ounce of like, I kind of feel bad for you guys, for Bills fans, for losing 4 straight, knowing you guys gave them 2 of them?
I grew up as a Minnesota Vikings fan where they lost four games too back in the
All right.
70s and 80s. So it's, it is what it is. They, to be able to get to that position, you're number 2. I mean, nobody remembers the number 2, but it's just, that's the way the game, goes many times.
Interesting. What did your teammates have any interesting nicknames for you since you're in the Air Force?
I had, Flyboy. I think Bill Bates called me Flyboy. Some of the old linemen, because some of the pass rush moves I used, they called me coal buckets because it was like I was carrying, like the old school coal buckets. And it's just, so I had a lot of funny ones.
Who is the most difficult offensive lineman for you to get through?
Larry Allen, no questions. I mean, the guy's in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
When you're that big, his playing weight, he's probably listed at 315, but he was every bit of 325, 330. Move, he had feet like a cat, never was out of position, never off balance, and he could bench press 750, let alone whatever he could squat. I mean, the guy was a beast, an animal. And, but that's what hones my skills is the guys that go up, you're practicing against them all the time.
Yeah.
So you're, again, sink or swim mentality, you're going to have to improve your skill set to be able to compete. So we pushed each other.
And then who was the toughest quarterback for you to bring to the ground?
Well, a lot of the guys back then, thinking of, Randall Cunningham's of the world to Steve Young's of the world to, early Warren Moon's of the world, the mobile quarterbacks, a lot that they have today, like your Kyler Murray's, et cetera.
Yeah.
And, your Dax too, before he gets hurt. Those were the guys that were the most challenging because you had to exhibit a lot of pass rush discipline, stay in your lane, that you couldn't improvise a lot, because if you would, you'd end up getting beat.
Yeah.
I mean, because they'd capitalize on it. They'd tuck the ball and they'd run. Those were the guys who were probably the most challenging, because if you had a straight drop back passer like a Dan Marino or a John Elway, even like a Troy, he's going to stay in the pocket. And they're not that necessarily mobile that if you get back there, you're going to either be able to get a ball or a hand on the ball to knock it down or, tackle them.
Yeah. And then you played with one of the greatest passers of all time, in Charles Haley. What kind of work ethic did he have to get to where he is?
Charles is awesome. I learned so much from him. He was one of the hardest working guys, and he was the true leader of our D-line. His knowledge base, not just on pass rushing skill set, but his knowledge of offenses, how he could evaluate film and come up with a game plan, how he would come up with a game plan, to go against a specific offensive lineman to be able to defeat whatever that technique that offensive lineman would utilize. I learned a lot from Charles, and he had a tremendous work ethic. And he worked so hard that he's, now he's got 2 new knees, that he may have 2 hips. His back is completely fused from his cervical vertebrae all down to his lower lumbar. His body took a beating, but he was relentless. And, we are great friends today, and I respect the heck out of him. And he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. I have a question. Early in your Cowboys days, did you connect with Staubach to see kind of what he did, since he also had service time?
Roger's been a great mentor and a great friend over the years, and having shared the academy experience that we had, serving, in a combat zone and then coming to ultimately play for America's team.
Yeah.
He's the man. Roger is the man. And then going on to transition from there to have a successful career in real estate. I followed him in those steps too, that I'm a fiduciary principal in a commercial real estate company based here in Dallas. So I'm kind of following Roger's footsteps.
That's awesome. That's so cool. That's wild. And I have a couple user submitted questions I got from some people that are fans of you. One of them is kind of stuck out to me. They said, we all know the star players of that dynasty, like the big 3, Moose, Jay, Woodson, Haley. Who do you think was the most underrated player that contributed more than people realized to help win those Super Bowls?
To win the Super Bowls?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, aside from like the triplets of Troy and Emmett, Michael and Charles Haley, those guys that consistently, like I'll talk about, it's the offensive line, like the John Giesiks of the world, the Big Nasty, the Eric Williams, that offensive line, Nate Newton, Mark Stepnoski, Larry Allen, of course, those guys were a beast. I mean, when you can dominate defenses where you can run at will and then pass, run the ball to open up the passing game. Remember Troy saying there are many times that, we would walk out on the field knowing right away we were going to win the game.
Wow.
I mean, with them, that they knew they would get on the field, and it totally sets the tone for every game when, if you're receiving the ball first, or when the first possession that your offense has, when you can drive the field and score a touchdown.
Yeah. Not
just a field goal, but a touchdown pretty much predominantly every series or every game.
I haven't seen Washington do it in 2 years. So
yeah, well, but that sets precedent. I mean, that sets tone. And when you're that far up, the defense loves it because the team has to play catch up. They're going to be throwing the ball more, so you can pin your ears back and rush the quarterback. And that's where we get, quote unquote, some of the press clippings from that way.
Wow. After the third one, we were like, all right, I'm good. Or you were like, we could do it again after the third Super Bowl?
We were disappointed we didn't do 4 in a row, because I really feel that we should have, when we lost to San Francisco in '93 in the NFC Championship game, where we basically spotted them 21 points in the first 7 minutes of the game.
Wow.
Almost came back to win. We should have went 4 in a row, and I think we could have gone more, but it's, again, hindsight, looking back on those experiences, it's tough to keep everybody on the same page, to have the same cohesive team vision. That, when success breeds apathy, and sometimes breeds, more of an internal individual focus.
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately led to that kind of the downfall of those dynasties. And, it's unfortunate, but we had a lot of fun when it lasted.
So since Troy Aikman calls, I feel like it's every Cowboys game because you guys are always on in the primetime slot. Do you think he has to kind of filter himself out to say what he really wants to say, or do you think he's brutally honest?
I think he's really honest. I think Troy's a true professional. He's not a homer. Like a Michael Irvin, Michael will tell you it's the Cowboys. That's the way, but Troy is very professional. He's going to call it the way he sees it. And that's what I respect about it.
Interesting. Do you think Dak's the guy going forward?
The big question mark for him is how, from a rehab standpoint, coming back after that horrific injury. And, it's what it does to your psyche. And, he's shown himself to be a very strong mental individual, to put a lot of the ancillary off the field antics, aside and concentrate on what's going on. But, again, it's his to lose.
Yeah.
And, obvious the last few weeks when your starting quarterback is out, where you can see why.
Well, Danucci's just setting the world on fire. I don't know why they took him out. He was great versus Washington.
We shall see. We shall see.
Interesting. And then I got one last question for you. So, how cool was it to get that letter that you got inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame?
To get that, to me, I got the letter, but I got the phone call from Steve Hatchell, the director, prior to that, saying that I was selected. I think at that time I didn't even know I was on the ballot.
Wow.
Tell you how much I was monitoring a lot of that. But for me, it's not just an acknowledgement for myself, but it's for those teams that I was very fortunate to be a part of at the Air Force Academy, where we, went from going to 3 different bowl games. And back then they only had 6 or 7 bowl games all year. So to be able to attend a bowl game was special. Now there's 30 different bowl games, whatever.
Too many.
But for that, and then, the teams that we had for the Service Academy, we finished 12-1. We beat the University of Texas in the Fubana Bowl in 1985 or 86 season. That was a big accomplishment. We beat Notre Dame 4 years in a row. These are things for those teams back then were pretty special. And, to be honored as an individual, I consider that, hey, accept that from my teammates.
That's awesome. And one last question, because I just remembered. I saw you've written a couple books. Can you talk about what led you to do that?
One of the things every time I thought about writing a book or was approached about writing a book, I asked myself, do I have a valid story to tell and to share? The first book I wrote was It Takes Commitment. And I think that my story that I thought was valid and I needed to share, particularly the book was geared towards younger people about the concept of commitment from a faith-based perspective. because of my experience growing up on a farm and going to the academy, following through with my commitment and not trying to circumvent the commitment to get directly into the NFL, but then being able to play in the NFL, winning Super Bowls. It's kind of a cool story, but it was all about the aspect of, in order to achieve anything in life, you have to be committed to your identity, your purpose, and your mission. Second book I wrote was a book called Rules of Engagement, where again, the valid story I wanted to share with men is kind of a life plan from a faith-based perspective on certain rules of engagement that we need to follow if you want to, quote unquote, live a life of excellence. And then my last book that I wrote was a book called Forces of Character, where I'm a big character integrity guy. And that's what I talk a lot on leadership is, and core values on, in order to be a leader, you have to be an individual of character. So I had conversations with 10 people that impacted my life.
Oh, cool.
That I thought exuded character. You know, names some of you have recognized: Roger Staubach,
That's
Troy
awesome.
Aikman, Jason Garrett, Greg Popovich, coach for the Spurs,
Wow.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, and then some other names whose stories were, I think, phenomenal. I interviewed a survivor of Auschwitz, an astronaut, a human rights attorney from former communist Romania, the national CEO for the National Center on Fathering, and a homelessness expert out of Dallas. Male, female, black, white, these people come from a variety of different backgrounds, but the one thing that they shared together was that they were people of integrity. And I document their story, their journey on why they are the way they are and how they've been able to impact other people.
That's awesome. Has Disney reached out to you to do a biopic about you? Because I feel like it's a long time coming.
No, my life's boring, man. That's
all right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Come on. No, I'll link all that to when I post it. But that's all the question I really have for you. I really do appreciate. Oh, okay, one more last one. How was your Veterans Day? Do you do anything fun?
I actually was speaking at a gathering in Orlando to the Republican Attorney General's Association.
Oh, wow.
So it was I was honored to be able to do it and to be able to speak to them. That's how I spent my Veterans Day.
That's awesome.
Serving.
That's awesome. So I know you guys did so many like giveaways. I'm like, it's awesome. Like, it's best day. But yeah, but I do appreciate taking time. I'll link all your stuff. How can people find you on social media? Keep up with you.
You just go to I have a website, chadhennings.com.
Cool. So last
and
question.
It's all on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and all that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, my last question comes out 5 questions, but I do appreciate you taking time. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping we get a real NFC East next year, because this year, like,
it hasn't been since the 90s, my friend. It hasn't been since the 90s.
If the Giants are winning the division, everybody else is doing something wrong.